God damn, I guess her kisses have that effect on everyone. Oh, but after that, I didn't have much time to think of anything. There was just so much going on at once, and I couldn't keep track of it all. I couldn't see Asi at all, and I hoped that she had been able to get back to the village before Dawn's power-up had failed completely. I don't think she did. There were darklings everywhere, and I was scared of seeing more of the horrors that I had witnessed before. I heard howls of pain here, a cry for help there. It was nothing short of absolute chaos, and it scared me. It scared me right down to my core. So I took that fear and used the horrors that lived in my mind and turned it into anger. Anger at the monsters that had spread so much misery to the people who didn't deserve it, and a determination to put an end to it, no matter what. You bitches, get out of my way! Using this to fuel my efforts, and boiled... What? God damn it. My brain died again. Buoyed by Dawn's strength boost, I charged forward, and for the first time my fear was forgotten. Shoved off to the side just long enough for me to wade into the nearest darkling and send her flying. And then the darkling after that, and the next one, and the next one. And with each darkling we defeated, we got a bit close to where Liliana waited. Just a bit closer to... No. Oh, uh-oh. A fireball whizzed through the air, forcing Dawn to jump back to avoid getting her face scorched. As we looked about, we saw Gwenor approaching, a determined look on her face as she held up her twin orbs of fire. We're so close to freedom. I won't let you ruin it now. Well, since your freedom seems to be coming at our expense, I'm gonna have to ruin it. Taki, go on ahead. I'll take care of this one. I was about to protest, but a few things stopped me. The first was Gwenor sending another fireball at Dawn, while the bunny girl retaliated with another wave of pink hearts. What the hell? The second was the fact that I knew I was on a time limit before my strength boost wore off. And the third was I spotted Nevia, Adriana, and a horde of darklings closing in on their target. And then I realized that I had no choice but to heed Dawn's orders if we were to save the people of this village. Crying out in guttural rage, I charged forward almost mindlessly, simply hacking and slashing and smashing anything that got my way. Normally this would have been suicide, and for all I knew then, it could still well be that. But the combination of my charge and sending darklings flying this way and that had one beneficial effect. It caused the two underworld girls to pause in their advance and look back, buying Zahn and the remaining guard a precious respite, allowing them to clear out more of the encroaching darklings. But as more darklings got in between me and the underworlders, Nevia scowled and glanced over at Adriana. Kill him! 2 words. 2 seemingly insignificant words that I had heard more times than I cared to count in movies, video games, and more. But they were words that made it clear my life was in danger, that the underworlders didn't care what damage they did or how many suffered and died, as long as they got what they wanted. Any other time, the fact that someone wanted to kill me would likely have gotten me to pause and rethink my current course of action. You know, basic self-preservation. But I had been through so much, and we were on the brink of destruction, and I was so caught up in finally being able to fight back that those 2 words flew right in one ear and out the other. I again focused on Nevia, who was advancing with several darklings upon Liliana's position. Get the fuck out of my way, I ain't got time for you. However, I did pay a fair amount of attention to Adriana, slid a fresh arrow into her crossbow, and pointed it in my direction. Still too caught up in the adrenaline rush to really think, I responded to the threat of the arrow the way I had seen in many video games. I held up my shield before me so that it was ready to block the shot. Of course, in the back of my mind, I realized that there was a chance that the arrow could pierce this crappy shield, or that a smart archer could easily aim below it and go for my feet or legs, but at the time I was too full of fury and adrenaline to really be thinking, so I likely would have been in very big trouble. That is, until I slipped. What? What? At first I couldn't understand what had happened. But then in the back of my mind, I remembered just how thoroughly soaked in slime the underworlders and their forces had been as a result of using Gwenor's ectopore. What? No! And that slime hadn't magically disappeared. Patches of it had been left all over the place as the Darklings and their cruel mistresses had swarmed over the village. And naturally enough, my foot had just found a large enough puddle of the stuff, sending me flying off my feet and crashing into the ground. But I didn't stop there. Between my current momentum and the fact that the goo made a great lubricant, I was sent skidding wildly across the ground, crying out in dismay as I shot towards Adriana, who was already turning to get away. Get wrecked! But it was already too late. I went crashing right into her, knocking the Underworlder Archer right off her feet and on top of me. Oh dear. And so the two of us started crying out as we skidded across the ground, crashing into multiple Darklings and sending them scattering. Ha! I win. Right up until the point we crashed into a wall, and I wound up with Adriana's legs wrapped around my neck, and my head positioned precisely above where it had been no business being. This is like something right out of an anime. As I struggled to disengage myself from the current predicament, a feminine groaning was heard. A groaning that turned out to be coming from Adriana, whose eyes had rolled up into her sockets and now completely prone. Realizing that serving as an airbag that had insulated me from crashing into some wall hadn't done any favors whatsoever, I hurriedly tossed Adriana aside and struggled to get back to my feet. Unfortunately, the slippery slime was quick enough to thwart my efforts, causing me to skid about wildly as I tried to find an effective hold. And then I really ran out of luck. I don't have time to waste on you. With this vehement declaration, Nevia lobbed a series of fireballs in my direction. Still unable to get to my feet, I lifted my shield so that I could take the blow. Oh! Fortunately, my shield's poor condition didn't stop it from sparing me a direct hit in the flames. And it also brought me the precious moments I needed to regain my footing and start towards her. Sword held high, I charged with a cry of fury, intent on ending this nightmare, here and now. But before I could get close enough to put my sword to work, tendrils of Nevia's hair shot towards me, snagging me by the ankles, and then by my wrists. No, please, I'm only a little boy of 18, crying out in dismay as I was knocked off my feet. My horror worsened when I felt my sword slipping from my grasp. I hurriedly tried to snatch it in midair, but even as I did so, I was hefted up even higher, until I was dangling helplessly a few feet in the air, just out of the reach of the ground. I saw what that bunny girl did to you. I saw your strength. And I know that it's only a matter of time before it wears off. So I think I'll just leave you hanging until it does, and then I will deal with you. But then, maybe I won't even have to wait that long. At first I didn't understand what Nevia meant by that, but then I heard the sound of something large moving. Looking about, I saw to my horror that the gates of Kahe were now swinging open. Somehow the Darklings had gotten to whatever controls were used to work the doors, and even more of the Underworld's slaves were spilling into the village, sending the people stumbling back against the walls in terror. And as I watched, Adriana recovered and spotted a sick, gloating smile. At last, this war is over and we've won! Get the head of the village! It's time to turn them all to darkness! No! Looking about, I saw Liliana backed into a corner, with Zahn and a few other guards fighting hard against what had been twice as many Darklings, with several more of their fellows lying upon the ground. And when I saw this, I looked about the rest of the village, time seeming to slow down as I took in the full magnitude of horror surrounding me. Everywhere I looked had the same horrors I had seen at the previous village were being repeated, as every evil that humanity was capable of, every barbarism the mind could conceive, was unleashed upon the people around me. Cries of despair and screams of horror filled the air, filling the expressions of the three Underworlder girls with such a deep pleasure. And with each moment that passed, it became that much clearer. We had lost. Oh, how I love this part. We're finally going to be free. We were done. We had fought hard, and had ultimately lost. But as I looked at the sick, gloating faces worn by the Underworlders, one last flame of rebellion burned brightly inside of me. And even though I was suspended off the ground, without any leverage, I could still see my battered sword just below me. Use the Force! Come on! As I looked at it, it occurred to me that Nevia was distracted, too focused on the victory that was all but in her grasp to pay any real attention to me. So perhaps... One chance. There's still one chance left. I realized that while the Darklings possessed a numerical superiority, there were still only 3 Underworlders. And if they could be stopped, they couldn't turn Liliana to darkness. So if I could just reach my sword, cut my way free... My thoughts petered out at this, my conscious mind unwilling to paint the gruesome image that those thoughts conjured. But I didn't stop trying to grab my sword. I didn't look to see if the Underworlders noticed me. I didn't turn to look towards the latest scream or barbarity being committed. I just keep straining, doing whatever I could to reach my sword. Fortunately, I had been right. In her distraction, Nevia wasn't paying any attention to me, wasn't keeping me as far off the ground as before. And so my questing fingers were able to pat at the ground next to my sword. Come on, come on! There's still time! You can stop them! You just have to stop them! Just... What the fuck? An instant later, a pattern of lights, almost like a circuit board, appeared around where my fingers had touched the ground. Lights that reached out to the blocks right beneath the 2 Underworld girls, which then rose up. What the fuck is happening? The sudden shifting in the ground sent them both off balance. Crying out in surprise, Adriana and Nevia windmilled their arms in a desperate attempt to stay on their feet, but ultimately fell flat on their faces. And since Nevia was the one holding me up, I very nearly did the same. But I had been able to catch myself just in time to land on my hands and knees. And while most either distracted or preoccupied with the Underworlders that had been planted their faces into the ground, I was given a few precious moments to think, and my gamer's mind immediately went to work. I'd fought plenty of boss battles that had been dependent upon a certain mechanic or finding and exploiting a given weakness. And so I had gotten very good on picking up on just how to defeat a boss with only a few faint clues. First of the clues was Asi's words from before. Our world, Burokku, is divided into an overworld and an underworld by the blocks that shape the overworld, make it what it is. The blocks were first created by our ancestors many ages ago, so as to make it simpler to craft this world into an ideal one. A world where we could all be happy, and could live in a place that met our needs and took care of us. The secret to moving the blocks was lost very long time ago, but even so, the land gave us everything we needed, and in return we tended to the land in relative harmony. Then I flashed back to when we arrived at Kahe village, and I had slumped against the gates. How I had wished for the gates to open for us, only to have them do just that, all seemingly without anyone opening them. The blocks, the overworld itself, it's all artificial, it's man-made, designed to be set up in a specific way, and even changed into different configurations. Which means that there has to be a way of controlling the blocks, putting them where they need to go. And if that's the case... Oh. A hateful snarl was the only one warning I had before a darkling fell on top of me, sending me rolling across the floor. Startled and scared, I had no time to recover as my back slammed into a nearby wall, leaving me momentarily dazed, stunned, and unable to do anything but look at as the darkling in question growled her hate, and drew forth a set of fireballs, one in each hand. My eyes went wide, and I was on the edge of panic, but I had been in a similar situation in multiple games, and the conditioning from those games kept me from losing focus on the vile game mechanic I had happened upon. Instead, I did my best to exploit it, and pressed my hands to the ground at my sides. Attack her! I didn't have time to look and see if similar circuit-like glyphs appeared in response to my command, but at the same time, my frantic tactic was rewarded. I'm just gonna wreck them with blocks! From the wall of the building, a series of blocks erupted, flying through the air and crashing into the darkling. The slammed enemy went crashing into the ground, unconscious before she knew what even hit her. But me? I was far from unconscious. In fact, I felt like a fire, like the new kind when I was entering a final boss battle for the very first time. Only on a whole new level. Dad, I really don't think this is a game. But if it is, then I just figured out how to play. And just in time, too. For at that very instant, my efforts had caught the attention of the underworld girls. I had already knocked on their faces. That boy! It's that boy! Adriana and Nevia were quick to act, trying to prevent me from pulling victory from the jaws of defeat. But they couldn't move as fast as my fingers, which again pressed against the blocks. And to my considerable delight, I again saw circuit glyphs appear on the blocks, allowing me to control the very surface the two underworlders had now stood upon. And just by imagining it, I was able to rearrange the blocks, forming a set of hands around the wicked woman. Hands that had held them both tight, until they reared back and launched the two girls through the air, screaming all the way. Did I just... Ah! Fuck! No! And as I watched and listened to them go flying away, I felt a great swell of satisfaction, and more flow through me. Did I just like Team Rocket blasting off again, then? I wasn't the helpless victim anymore. I wasn't the burden that others had to protect. I could finally fight back. And that's exactly what I did. My instincts told me that I could continue from my present location was a bad idea. I was simply too vulnerable standing around on the ground where any darkling could get to me. So I placed my hands on the blocks at my feet and began rearranging them, forming a platform that rose up into the air, putting me out of harm's way. Kneeling down upon my hovering refuge, I then went to work, commanding the blocks to wage this war. Before anyone realized what was happening, hundreds of blocks emerged from their slots in the various surfaces and heeded my every whim. Get the fuck out of here! All around me, blocks were slamming into every darkling in sight, smashing and crashing into them and knocking them to the ground, freeing up the village defenders greatly. I watched as Dawn collected herself, shakily closing her top as she looked about at the darklings that had so gleefully violated her. Oh, I saw Liliana and her protectors looking at me in sheer amazement, scarcely able to fathom what was happening. Asahi, she's okay, I hope. And I saw Asahi, bruised, battered, and bloodied, but still alive, and looking up at me like I was an angel, descended from the heavens to save them all. If that's the case, then I better get to work. The current fighting had been stalled, but as I looked about, I could see more darklings still outside, already making their way through the gates. The first thing that needed to be done was to put them someplace where they wouldn't be able to hurt anybody, at least until they could be freed from the darkness. And since there didn't seem any place convenient to put them, I would just have to make a place. Flying my platform out past the wall surrounding the village, I found myself thinking of a classical defensive feature that was to be found surrounding many fantasy-style castles in the games I had played. And while I couldn't summon a handy rainstorm for a moat, I could most certainly dig one now, and with just a thought. Ooh? As I pictured a moat forming around the wall, the blocks that made up the landscape compiled and made my vision a reality. Hundreds of blocks began rising from the ground surrounding Kahe village, leaving the darkness to scream in confusion as they began tumbling down into the massive pit I had just dug for them. They screamed and clawed and desperately tried to find a handhold with which to avoid taking the plunge, but since I was able to control every single handhold, that didn't happen. I don't know how long I had to work, how long it took to open up a crevice large enough to hold every single one of the darklings that remained outside the village. All I know is that the final result was a gaping pit so large, from the air, it looked like a massive donut, and Kahe village was merely the hole. But even then, the job wasn't done. The odds had been tipped in our favor, that much was certain. But what couldn't be certain was if I had managed to get all the darklings into the hole and away from the people. So I turned the platform I was on about and sent it back towards the village interior. Asahi! Asahi! I'm over here. Following the sound of her voice, I once again laid eyes on the battered warrior woman who had been my companion from the very moment I had arrived in Burokku. And I looked into the eyes that were filled with a mix of relief, confusion, and something else altogether. Something that... Are you alright? Are there any more darklings? I'm not sure. They got pretty hard and hit... Taki, how are you doing this? I don't know. I mean, it just sort of happened, and... I trailed helplessly as I took in Asahi's stupefied gaze, and lost the ability to speak completely as I took in the other gazes being turned in my direction. and it didn't take me long to figure out why. Because I'm a god among men.